Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. This is the weekly news wrap up for Friday, December 30th, 2016, the WNW 266, the last one of the year. The theme in this weekly news wrap up Obama's actions and the economy. And I want to start with Obama's actions. And this is the general premise that I've been just seeing as I'm looking at all these stories and all these possibilities and all the things he's doing or may do. Is he trying to create, and I'm asking this question, is he trying to create as much chaos as possible before he leaves office? I mean, this isn't like he's giving somebody a pardon. This isn't like he's signing some pork barrel stuff for somebody in his party. I mean, this is absolutely off the charts what he's doing. Let's start with this UN censure, which Kerry and the Obama administration say they had nothing to do with it, but the Israelis say, oh yes, they had everything to do with this censure, which is the UN censure leaves Israel unfazed. Well, they are phased. They made all their settlements basically illegal and criminal under international law. This recent UN censure basically puts the Wailing Wall, the Western Wall, a 4,000-year-old Israeli religious site, a Jewish religious site in Palestinian-occupied territory. Oh, that's going to settle things down. That's like making the Temple Mount with the Al-Aqsa Mosque on it, Israeli property. Do you think that would settle things down? You think the Palestinians would go absolutely crazy? Of course they would. Charles Schumer, the incoming minority leader from New York, says, oh, this is going to inflame extremists on both sides. Not happy. All kinds of things going on in the background, and yet the USA Today says, oh, John Kerry pushes Minnie's peace plan. No, this is not a peace plan. When you make the Wailing Wall occupied Palestinian territory, that's not a peace plan. They have a big summit between the Palestinians and Israelis in Paris, I think in the middle of next month. And that's not going to go well. I mean, here you have Donald Trump telling the Israelis to hold on, and then you have this lopsided agreement, which they don't say that, listen, the Palestinian Authority and Hamas, what you're doing, attacking Israelis and paying people to murder Jews and teaching your children that Jews are bad and you should kill them. That's what's happening. And also all these terror attacks, and that you need to recognize Israel. Nothing really said about that. It's a prerequisite. You have to recognize Israel. And now what both sides are saying, what people on both sides of this issue are saying is that, the two-state solution is dead. I mean, even John Kerry, Secretary of State Kerry, says that, either you could be a Jewish state or democracy, you can't be both. So I don't know. I know one thing. This latest UN resolution in Breitbart is reporting that there's going to be more action before Obama leaves office. Now, I don't know if President Obama is trying to make himself look good to the Muslim world so he could become the next Secretary General of the UN. He's the leader of the UN. I don't know. I don't know if he's trying to do things that are going to be irreversible for Donald Trump. I do know that this is going to spark great consternation and maybe another war. I mean, listen, incoming minority leader for the Democratic Party in the Senate, Charles Schumer, says it's going to inflame extremists on both sides. So this is not settling things down. The other thing that I've been hearing is that they're going to defund, possibly, they're talking about defunding the UN. And there's bipartisan support for that. Now, there's all kinds of things that America can do. We're still a very strong economic and military power. And if Israel, because of this UN most recent thing, is open for sanctions, it's open for maybe some of their people to be considered criminals. It's open for lawsuits. It's open for all kinds of things, and it basically lopsides the negotiations before they go to Paris in the middle of this month. But the U.S. can revoke people's diplomatic status. The U.S. could revoke the Palestinians' diplomatic status. They could cut funding to the UN. They could cut funding to the Palestinian Authority. I think we still fund Hamas in the Gaza Strip. There are all kinds of things that could happen, and none of them are good. It's it's just going to add to the basket of horrendous trouble that's already been created in the Middle East by the Obama administration. I mean, let's just stay right here on this, Kerry pushes Mideast peace plan. Not. Let's just stay right here and talk about another of one of Obama's fabulous, and under Hillary Clinton, fabulous, policies, and that's the policy in Libya, where people like this will get on a rubber inner tube and try to swim across the Mediterranean Sea north to Italy. And according to this article, 1,400 people were fished out of the water in one day because of the chaos that is happening in Libya. Thank you, Hillary Clinton. That was supposed to be one of her crowning pieces of glory, to put terrorists into Libya without using U.S. forces, and put them into Libya and get rid of Gaddafi, Muammar Gaddafi. We came, we defeated him, he got shot, he died. Hillary Clinton laughing about Muammar Gaddafi being killed while in custody. That was supposed to be one of her crowning achievements. Of course, I don't want to even get into Benghazi and all that, but, Libya is a destabilized mess that's being fought over by all kinds of factions, and one of the biggest ones is ISIS in Libya. If you go over to Egypt, where the Obama administration backed the Muslim Brotherhood, that lasted for about 5 months, and now Sisi and the military took over. At least Sisi is telling the clerics over there, the Islamic radicals, to say, hey, stop this. We can't be doing this. If you move down to Yemen, that was supposed to be one of the bright spots, quote unquote, of Obama's policy. That's a disaster area. If you move up to Iraq, where he moved all of our troops out, that's how, we moved all of our troops out, created a vacuum, and ISIS filled it, took all of our equipment and all this other stuff, and we supposedly were supporting the Free Syrian Army, but no, not that. Maybe at one time we did, but actually we're not. We'll talk about more about that in a minute. That's another gigantic mess. Then if you just go up to Turkey, and you take a look at what's going on there, there's more strife and more problems. And if you take a look at that, you have the people in Turkey. You have Erdogan, who is basically saying that, and this is a huge bomb that was covered over by what's going on. Erdogan, he has confirmed evidence that U.S. supports ISIS. Now, this is the leader of Turkey, a NATO country, says that he has confirmed evidence the U.S. supports ISIS. The Middle East is an absolute tinderbox. It's on fire. I don't know. I guess next maybe the president will order the RB-52 bombers to leave Diego Garcia and fly all over the Middle East and drop napalm on them and catch it on fire even more. And oh, by the way, we have left off the Iranian non-deal deal where nothing was signed, and we gave them $150 billion, which included pallets full of currency. That even Secretary of State John Kerry said, well, yeah, we admit that they'll be causing terrorism with some of this, some of this money. It's unbelievable. In Syria alone, we had 500,000 people dead in the civil war where we backed ISIS. I mean, we supposedly backed the Free Syrian Army, and maybe at one time we did, but they're long gone. And now a NATO member is saying, oh yeah, the U.S. is supporting ISIS in Syria. By the way, while all this is going on with Israel and the rest of the Middle East and all this other stuff and the Russian hacking, which I'll talk about more in a minute, while all this is going on, the Syrian government and armed opposition reached ceasefire agreement. This is according to Vladimir Putin. Where was John Kerry? Gone. Where was the Obama administration? Not there. They weren't involved in this. They were too busy, sanctioning Israel or, talking about the phony Russian hacking or whatever. But supposedly, President Putin of Russia has worked out a ceasefire. I remember the last one John Kerry worked out with Lavrov, their foreign minister. 4 days into it, we send 4 jets in to bomb a Syrian military base and kill dozens of Syrian soldiers, along with a few Russians and Hezbollah, Iranians, along with it. That was 4 days into the so-called ceasefire. We went on a bombing mission on a mountaintop in Syria at a strategic location. So, if you look at the Middle East and the policies in the last 8 years by the Obama administration, it is a destabilized mess. On top of it, with this nuclear non deal, which, again, according to the incoming director of the CIA, Mike Pompeo, that when he asked the Kerry State Department, they said, oh, nothing was signed. There's no deal. You don't give somebody $150 billion in pallets of money without having anything signed. There is no deal. If there is, I'd like to see it, like to read it for public consumption. I mean, it's so great. It was such a fantastic accomplishment of the Obama administration. Let's see it. It's nowhere to be found. And this is another tremendously destabilizing factor in the Middle East because it raises the specter of a nuclear arms race. I brought this up a few years ago about how Saudi Arabia was freaking out about Iran in Syria. That's going to be the next problem after ISIS is defeated, is Iran in Syria. And, the Sunnis are freaked out by the Shia, which is the Iranian. And, the Pakistanis are working on the bomb. Supposedly, reportedly, Saudi Arabia was trying to buy nuclear weapons and funded them from out of Pakistan. I mean, this is an absolute mess in the Middle East, and it is courtesy of the U.S. State Department under Hillary Clinton and John Kerry, and overseen by Barack Obama. And as I'm reading all these stories, what's coming up in my head is he trying to create as much chaos as possible before he leaves office? And another rumor that's going around, and I think it's a good one, he's reportedly, by some sources, Obama is going to let all the rest of the prisoners out of Gitmo. Now, that's the worst of the worst. Those guys could audition for the character of, in Silence of the Lambs. I mean, these are the worst of the worst. And he's going to, come make good on a campaign promise to close it down and bulldoze it, let all these guys out on a weekend. I don't know. But it's, I keep coming back to the central question. Is President Obama trying to cause as much chaos as possible? And then, again, on that stream of thought, let's go right back to, this Russian hacking. Obama strikes back at Russia for hacking. They expel 35 folks, and they confiscate and take control of a couple of multi-million-dollar, retreat properties that the Russians have. And I just want to read this to you. Samples of malware were in what the Obama administration called a joint analytic report from the FBI and Department of Homeland Security, and that was based on on intelligence gathering by the National Security Agency, the NSA. A more detailed report on the intelligence ordered by President Obama will be published in the next 3 weeks, though much of the detail, especially evidence collected from implants, quote unquote, in Russian computer systems, tape conversation and spies, is expected to remain classified. So the proof is expected to remain classified. In this report, which I read it, they said, well, at least one actor was responsible on clicking on a phishing scheme with a PH phishing, and lost all their emails and lost records. Well, that was reportedly John Podesta supposedly clicked on some phishing scheme, didn't protect his computer, but who knows who this is from? There's been plenty of intelligence people on the other side of this question saying that, this didn't happen. I mean, the FBI, how can you explain James Comey for a week saying, the Russians haven't hacked, the elections, the U.S. elections. And by the way, my friend James Clapper, who lied to Congress when asked about, is the CIA, is the intelligence community, spying on Americans? And of course he said no, and of course that was a lie. And James Comey was has reportedly said that James Clapper agrees with me. Then all of a sudden this big 180-degree turn, and all of a sudden Comey and Clapper and all these guys are all on board, and they have this report that's 18 pages long. And incidentally, the proof is classified. And then you have people on the other side saying that's preposterous. It's utterly preposterous. Julian Assange has repeatedly said this is the guy that broke the emails. This is the guy that put out the emails, WikiLeaks, Julian Assange. And he said, I didn't get any of this stuff from the Russians. And what a lot of people have said, this is hacks, not leaks. I'll tell you one thing it has done, this whole Russian hacking thing. There was a time, where the Democrats would once in a while say that, this is tawdry information about collusion, about corruption, about cheating, about, you name it. And it was in these emails. And what they have done, because they quit saying that, these are fake or these aren't real. Well, now they're saying, well, the Russian hacked the DNC. Well, then they basically admitted all this stuff that got dumped was, in fact, true. This information was true, and the emails were good, and they were authentic. And then you have the Obama administration, where Putin is just, this makes Obama look like a hack. That he just negotiates a peace deal with Turkey, Syria, and Russia, and the rebels, ISIS, and they just had their tails kicked in Aleppo. And then the Obama administration expels 35 Russian officials in retaliation for the 2016 election interference, which he said in October, Obama, that Russians aren't having any effect on our elections. Of course, after his party loses, it was the Russians. And then you have, Kremlin spokesman vows retaliation against U.S. sanctions. This is WAPO, Washington Post. If you look at what the Russians are saying, the Russians are chiding the Obama administration. Russian embassy in UK responds to sanctions with lame duck tweet, talking about how he's a lame duck president. Here's another one. Russian, warns of a proportional response to Obama's paranoia. There's all kinds of things the Russians can do to get at us. It's not like they're a small, little island country, a little insignificant country. I'm not afraid of the Russians, but listen, if you're going to go after them, you better prove it. That's a huge charge that they're saying that the Russians interfered in our election so much that their candidate, Hillary Clinton, who they cheated to win the primary, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the head of the DNC, stepped down over that. Donna Brazile, the acting head of the DNC, helped Hillary Clinton cheat against Bernie Sanders. If you look at that, they cheated their candidate in. She had all kinds of scandals with her emails and everything else going on. And by the way, President Obama may end up pardoning her, but boy, that is a sticky wicket. Listen, on not preserving federal records, which is a felony, which is what Nixon got into trouble for, and he was pardoned for ahead of time without being charged, she's guilty. Listen, I've said this before, I'll say it again. She used private servers, multiple, plural, private servers to cover the fact she was taking treasonous bribes from foreign countries in the form of donations to her global charity fraud. Of course she didn't preserve any records. That would nail her to the cross. So is that another thing that Obama's going to do? Pardon her before he leaves office. If he does, basically it's a tacit admission that his administration was full of crime and bribe taking and treason. It's something that's absolutely, I've never seen it before, and I have no idea what he's got. He still has 20 days or so to go before before Trump is sworn in on the 20th of January. I don't think the Russians are going to take the bait and start a war with Obama when they have, 20-something days to go before Trump is sworn in. Trump, his tweet is, let's move on. Trump doesn't want this. He wants to get America going. He wants to bring jobs to America. And that's what he said he wants to do. I do say he's going to have trouble in the bond market. He's going to have trouble with rising interest rates. I think Trump's going to get inflation. I think he's going to get some deflation as well. And that leads me right into the next thing. But I just want to wrap up this little segment. Is Obama trying to create as much chaos as possible? And I say yes. Yes. And, the Breitbart is reporting that they're not done with the sanctions. They're not done with the actions in the UN. And that is not what outgoing presidents do. This is unprecedented in the history of America, that a president will take this many dramatic actions a month before he leaves office. This wasn't like we had Pearl Harbor happen and he had to do something. This is Obama acting unilaterally at all kinds of fronts. The economy. A lot of people have asked me, why haven't we had this thing blown up yet? I'm surprised. I am surprised, but the manipulation is deep. They've gone full gangster criminal on LIBOR, on manipulating gold and silver prices, on Forex, on the stock market, on the bond market, you name it. On the housing crisis was fixed. The robo signing, which was forgery, perjury, and fraud on the court. I mean, we don't have markets. And here we have a nearly $20,000 Dow Jones. It's hitting a few bumps here lately, but nearly. And so I was telling somebody, I tried to simply explain this. And I was at a party, and the person knew what I was doing. It was a friend of mine's wife, and she says, can you just explain what's going on? I said, you know what? Yes. Here's what went on. Okay. This is like going to your doctor's office, and your doctor comes up and says, Sue, Bob, hey, listen, you got cancer. Now, we can cut it out. Ooh, it's going to hurt. You're going to have radiation, chemo, and your hair's going to fall out, and it's going to be rough. You may lose a little movement here or there or whatever, but it's going to be tough. Or I can give you Dilaudid. What would you like? You know what we said? Oh, give me the painkiller. What do you suppose happened to that cancer? If you take a painkiller instead of remediating the problem, cutting it out, and having chemo and radiation and going after it, what do you think happened to that cancer? You got it. It got worse. And, no matter how many times I say we don't have markets and they've gone full criminal and they've manipulated this, and the Plunge Protection Team, went in and turned the market around after the Trump election or whatever. You know what? I thought about how I was going to explain to people the danger in the market. And I found the perfect way to do it a year ago, a little less than a year ago. A former Fed president sat on the set of CNBC when the market started unwinding at the beginning of 2016. Remember that? I mean, they just had day after day after day after day after day. It was the worst January, ever. The worst start to a market ever. I mean, the market should have closed down 4,000 points for the year, but no. The full gangster took over, full manipulation took over, full everything took over. But here is former Fed president, and this is Richard Fisher. Okay, he was a former Dallas Fed president. Come on, go along, read this. This is a year ago, a little more than January 5th, I think. Former Fed president, we injected cocaine and heroin into the system to create a wealth effect. Breathe that in. We injected cocaine and heroin into the system to create a wealth effect. He's talking about how they injected the system with all kinds of funny money and manipulation and everything else, and it was severe. It was coke. Can you imagine taking cocaine and heroin together? Well, you can OD and die. Could you imagine what would happen when you came down from that little cocktail? If there was ever a warning, and that, listen, he was cleared to come on set and say this. Maybe the Fed thought that they weren't going to be able to turn it around. I don't know. Maybe they were trying to warn people so they could say, well, we warned you. I mean, he was part of the whole cocktail of QE 1, 2, 3, twist, whatever. All the overt and covert actions by the Federal Reserve to prop up the economy. And boy, they did it. And look no further than a former insider's insider, a former Fed president, not some clerk, not some deputy, a guy, a president, he was on all the calls. And then Mannarino, Greg Mannarino, which he called and said, he wanted to bring out the fact, let me read this to you. And he's looking at this chart, the bond market. I've been worried about the bond. It's still about 2.5% of the 10-year. The 10 years where they set 30-year mortgages and all that. Mortgages have now spiked up to 4%. You see this line right here? You don't know what you look, but this is the 10-year and this is the 30-year. And this part of the yield curve is flattening out. And he talks about pinning down the yield curve. Well, there he is. It's pinning it down right here. It's like a 0.5%, 0.6%, something like that. And he talks about the middle and long end of the curve is flattening out. That's what this is right here. He made this up special for me today. And when this curve flattens out, the last time we had the curve, that we had a flat curve between the 10 and the 30 year, resulted in the bursting of the dot-com bubble and the 2008 stock market crash. Look what's happening again. A flattening out of the long end, the 10, the 30, the long end of the yield curve. Now here the Fed is pinning down the short end of the curve. This is over here. That's this circle right over here. This is according to Mannarino, traderschoice.net. Here the Fed is pinning down the short end of the curve. If the Fed were not doing this, the entire curve would already have been nearly flat. And what Mannarino is saying, that the long end of the curve is flat, and this is generally understood as a bad economic sign, possible looming recession and coming inflation. And if that isn't a warning, if you couple that the chart of that flattening of the curve, and you take a look at what the Fed said, nothing changed since the Fed said this. I mean, we didn't reinvent the internet. We didn't send colonies to Mars and they sent back bricks of gold. We didn't cure cancer and for everybody on the planet. I mean, there's nothing that's driving this market this much higher. And remember what Michael Pento said, pentoport.com. Michael Pento was talking about how, the beginning of the year, we're going to see one heck of a sell-off. It's going to be 2016 all over again in 2017. And of course, remember, we didn't address any of the problems. We didn't address the cancer. We took Dilaudid. We took the painkiller. We just put that off. And so, folks, if you're in the market, you may want to lighten up. I'm not a money manager. I don't sell any gold. I don't sell any silver. I don't sell anything. I mean, Warren Pollack on his interview talked about gold and it could be going down, and some people mistook that as, it's a mistake. Well, near term it's going to be going down. There's going to be big inflation, and there's also going to be deflation, as Ivan von Greyerz said. Ivan von Greyerz, of Matterhorn Capital Management, he's the founder of that. Also a big guy in banking in Europe, a financial expert, gold expert, and he says, we're going to have the inflation, which is deflation, and the best example of that is debt destruction. Puerto Rican bonds, $70 billion in Puerto Rican bonds. That is a canary that has fell off the bar and fell on the floor and is rotting on the floor. They're not paying that money back. They've defaulted. That somehow $70 billion default with Puerto Rico is not a big deal, but it's a big deal. Trust me. There are people that are telling me that people are leaving Puerto Rico in droves. It's getting terrible. Wait until they have to borrow money. Wait until they have to use some capital. Oh, man. I mean, woe be the Puerto Ricans if they get involved with, let's say, the Chinese financiers. I mean, we'll lose Puerto Rico because they're going to, in the contract, make it a stipulation in the contract. You default on this, we take your airport. We take your ports. We take your highways. We take everything we take it all. I mean, they'll have to pay 15, 20%, whatever. They're going to pay big money to borrow money after defaulting on $70 billion. So we're going to have both, but I will get back to listening to a former Fed president, Richard Fisher. We injected heroin and cocaine into the markets. That is still the market we have. When the market comes down from the heroin and cocaine, and it will, and a rising bond market will give you one heck of a hangover, look out. Who is going to buy bonds if you have a 2.5% bond and bonds are heading to 4 or 5%? Who is going to buy? Man, they're going to add up in a hurry. And that's why Warren Pollack said, I think we have a 10-year treasury a lot sooner than you think, because the bonds will go up until they catch a bid, until somebody buys it, until somebody thinks that's a good return on investment relative to inflation. So I want to warn you here at the last weekly news wrap-up of the year that, there are a lot of signs that this may end up being the exact redux of January of 2016. And will the Fed be able to pull this out? And if you add in all the other troubles around the world, I mean, the Middle East when 2016 was nowhere near what it is now. The tensions with China, let's just talk about that for a second, were nowhere near what they are now. And the consternations in Europe back in the beginning of 2016 were nowhere near what they are now. Now add that into a brand new year with rising interest rates and the Fed saying, we're going to raise rates 3 times. You're getting to a run, Forrest, run moment. And I worry about people and their retirement and their money. And then this could cause all kinds of huge trouble if we get a crash. There might not be anything stopping it. And are they doing that? Is the Obama administration, along with all the stuff they're doing, and the global powers that hate Trump and America first and all that, and the the New World Order people, pro New World Order people, are they going to crash the economy on Donald Trump and blame it on him? It may crash before Obama leaves the office. Leaves office. It may totally crash before he leaves office. I wouldn't be surprised if it does. Really. And so with that, I wrap up the last USA Watchdog Weekly News wrap-up of the year. Thank everybody for your support. The site grew. Lots of good comments, lots of smart people. Jerry, you know who you are. You know all the links there from Missouri and all the comments. You're one of my favorite commenters. A lot of really smart people come on and comment and support the site. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for supporting USAWatchdog.com with your comments and donations. And remember, fear not. Prepare yourself mentally, physically, above all, spiritually. Fear not. God the Father is in charge. Happy New Year.